The glass elevator ascended silently through the Reuters Tower as Sofia Reeves watched the Seattle skyline emerge through the morning fog. At 36, she was about to execute the most crucial phase of a plan 3 years in the making. Her reflection in the polished doors showed a woman dressed in an impeccable charcoal suit, her dark hair swept into a sleek chignon, betraying nothing of the anticipation coursing through her veins. "Good morning, Ms. Reeves." Thomas Ward, her attorney, greeted her as she stepped onto the 47th floor. "The papers are ready." Sofia nodded, her heels clicking against the marble floor as they walked toward the conference room. "Any last-minute surprises from the Whitman camp?" "None. Margaret Whitman still believes she's acquiring your tech startup. She has no idea she's walking into her own resignation." The thought brought a slight smile to Sofia's face. Margaret Whitman, CEO of Whitman Technologies and Sofia's former mentor, had spent the last 3 years systematically trying to destroy everything Sofia had built. Today, she would learn the true cost of underestimating the woman she'd once called her protagonist. The conference room was already filling with board members when Sofia arrived. She took her seat quietly, watching as Margaret swept in moments later, her signature red blazer a splash of color against the room's muted tones. At 58, Margaret still commanded attention, her silver hair and patrician features lending her an air of authority that had intimidated Sofia when they first met a decade ago. "Shall we begin?" Margaret's voice carried its usual note of carefully cultivated warmth. "I believe we're here to finalize the acquisition of Reeves Digital Solutions." Her eyes met Sofia's with what appeared to be sympathy. "I'm sure this is a difficult day for you, Sofia, but sometimes knowing when to let go is the mark of true wisdom." Sofia thought about the day, 3 years ago, when everything had changed. She'd been celebrating the successful launch of her company's revolutionary AI security platform when Margaret had called, requesting a private meeting. They'd met in Margaret's penthouse office, where the older woman had made what she called a generous offer to buy Sofia's company. "Your technology has potential," Margaret had said, "but you need Whitman's resources to truly succeed. Let us acquire you now, before you face the challenges of scaling up." Sofia had declined politely but firmly. She'd built her company from the ground up, mortgaging her house and pouring every penny of her savings into development. The technology was revolutionary, and she knew its true value. That's when the sabotage began. First came the whispers in the tech community about security flaws in Sofia's platform. Then key employees were poached with offers too generous to refuse. Potential clients began canceling meetings, citing mysterious concerns about reliability. Each setback seemed random, but Sofia recognized the pattern. Margaret was using the same tactics she'd often bragged about employing against her competitors. What Margaret didn't know was that Sofia had learned more than just business strategies during their mentorship. She'd learned how Margaret thought, how she operated, and most importantly, how she failed to notice threats that didn't fit her preconceptions. Before we proceed with the acquisition documents, Thomas interrupted Sofia's thoughts. "There are some preliminary matters to address." He began distributing folders to the board members. Margaret frowned slightly. "I wasn't aware of any preliminary matters. Just some standard corporate governance issues," Thomas replied smoothly. "You'll notice on page 3 the voting record from last night's emergency shareholder meeting." The room fell silent as the board members began reading. Sofia watched Margaret's face carefully, noting the exact moment realization dawned. "This is impossible," Margaret whispered, her composure cracking for the first time. "These voting shares, these investment groups, are all controlled by me," Sofia finished quietly, "through a series of holding companies I've established over the past 2 years. As of last night's vote, I control 51% of Whitman Technologies' voting shares." Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she turned the pages. "How?" "You taught me well," Sofia replied. "About patience, about misdirection, about letting your opponent think they're winning while you position your pieces. While you were focused on destroying my company, I was using its remaining assets and my personal fortune to gradually acquire control of yours." The board members were now watching the exchange with rapt attention. Many of them had their own grievances with Margaret's leadership style, which was one reason Sofia had found it so easy to secure their support. "The vote has already been recorded," Thomas continued professionally. "Ms. Whitman is hereby removed as CEO of Whitman Technologies. Ms. Reeves will assume the position, effective immediately." Margaret's face had gone pale. The acquisition was never real, Sofia confirmed. It was simply a way to get you into this room, to help you understand exactly how it feels to have everything you've built taken away by someone you underestimated. The next hour passed in a blur of signatures and legal formalities. Margaret sat silent throughout, her earlier confidence shattered. As the board members filed out, she remained seated, staring at the documents in front of her. "Why?" she finally asked. "I was your mentor." Sylvia stood, smoothing her suit. "You were supposed to be. Instead, you taught me that no success would be tolerated unless it came under your control. So I built something stronger, something you couldn't see coming because you were too busy trying to destroy what was right in front of you." She picked up her briefcase, pausing at the door. "You can keep your board seat, Margaret. I'm not like you. I don't mean to destroy people to prove my worth. But remember this moment the next time you think about undermining someone you consider beneath you." As Sofia walked through the halls of what was now her company, she thought about the long road that had led here. The nights spent rebuilding after each of Margaret's attacks, the careful accumulation of evidence, the strategic placement of allies throughout Whitman Technologies. It had required patience, precision, and an absolute conviction that justice would eventually prevail. Her phone buzzed. A message from her husband, Michael. "Is it done?" "Yes," she typed back. "Meeting you for lunch to celebrate." Michael had been her rock throughout this ordeal, believing in her even when Margaret's attacks had seemed overwhelming. He'd never doubted her ability to turn the tables, even when she doubted herself. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of transition. Sofia moved quickly to stabilize both companies, announcing a merger that would preserve jobs while streamlining operations. She reached out personally to clients who'd been scared away by Margaret's whisper campaign, presenting evidence of the sabotage and her plans for the future. 3 months later, Sofia sat in what had been Margaret's office, reviewing quarterly reports. The merger was proceeding smoothly, employee morale was up, and the stock price had risen 15% since the takeover. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, looking up to see Margaret standing in the doorway. It was their first meeting since the takeover. "The board meeting is about to start," Margaret said stiffly. "I thought we might walk down together." Sofia studied her former mentor. Margaret looked older somehow, the past months having taken their toll. But there was something different in her bearing, a hint of humility that hadn't been there before. "Of course," Sofia replied, gathering her papers. They walked in silence for a moment before Margaret spoke again. "I've been thinking about what you said, about not needing to destroy people to prove your worth." She paused. "I spent so many years believing that was the only way to succeed in this industry. Watching you these past months, you've proven there's another way." Sofia stopped walking, turning to face her. "There's always another way, Margaret. Success doesn't have to be a zero-sum game." "I'm beginning to understand that," Margaret admitted. "I've been working with a leadership coach, trying to be better." Sofia nodded, recognizing the effort it must have taken for Margaret to say these words. "That's a good start." As they entered the boardroom, Sofia reflected on how different this scene was from her early days in the industry. She'd been so eager to prove herself, so desperate for Margaret's approval. Now she understood that true success wasn't about winning anyone's approval. It was about staying true to your principles while building something meaningful. The next year brought changes no one could have predicted. Under Sofia's leadership, the merged company pioneered new technologies in AI security, creating tools that protected privacy while advancing innovation. Margaret, true to her word, worked to transform her leadership style, eventually becoming a valuable ally in the company's expansion. One evening, as Sofia was preparing to leave the office, she found a small package on her desk. Inside was a framed photo from 15 years ago, her first day as Margaret's intern. A note was attached. "You've built something remarkable, not just in business, but in showing there's a better way to lead. I'm sorry I lost sight of that somewhere along the way. Thank you for teaching me again, Margaret." Sofia placed the photo on her desk, next to a more recent one of her executive team. The contrast between the eager intern she'd been and the leader she'd become was striking. She'd learned that true power wasn't about domination or control. It was about creating opportunities for others to succeed while staying true to your own values. Her phone buzzed with a message from Michael. "Don't forget we're meeting the realtor about the new house tomorrow." Sofia smiled, thinking about the future they were building. The house wasn't just a symbol of their success, it was a testament to resilience, to the power of taking the higher road even when others chose a darker path. As she gathered her things to leave, Sofia caught her reflection in the window. The woman who looked back at her wasn't just a successful CEO or a strategic victor. She was someone who had faced betrayal and chosen to rise above it, who had found a way to win without losing her humanity. The Seattle skyline glittered in the evening light as she rode the elevator down. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to choose between expedience and ethics, between revenge and redemption. But Sofia knew now that the greatest victory wasn't in destroying your opponents, but in transforming them into allies. Her car was waiting in the underground garage, the driver holding the door as she approached. "Home, Ms. Reeves?" "Yes," she replied, settling into the back seat. "Home." As the car merged into traffic, Sofia thought about the legacy she was building. It wasn't just about corporate success or strategic brilliance, it was about showing that there was strength in compassion, power in forgiveness, and victory in staying true to your principles even when others abandoned theirs. The city lights blurred past her window, each one a reminder of the countless decisions that had led her here. She had chosen the harder path, refusing to let Margaret's betrayal turn her into someone she didn't want to be. In doing so, she had not only won the battle but had changed the rules of engagement for those who would follow. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but Sofia was ready. She had learned that true success wasn't measured in acquisitions or stock prices, but in the lives you touch and the changes you inspired. She had become not just the architect of her own fortune, but a blueprint for a different kind of leadership, one built on integrity, resilience, and the courage to remain true to your principles, even in the face of adversity. The car turned onto her street, and Sofia smiled, thinking of the journey ahead. She had transformed not just a company, but an entire culture, and in doing so, she had proven that the greatest revenge wasn't in destroying your enemies, but in showing them a better way forward. That was a legacy worth building.